Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, released for the PlayStation 1 in 1997, is a groundbreaking entry in Konami's Castlevania series. It is considered one of the greatest video games of all time for its innovation in gameplay, exploration, and atmosphere. The game is set in 1797, 5 years after the events of Castlevania, Rondo of Blood. You play as Alucard, the son of Dracula, who enters his father's castle after it mysteriously reappears. His goal is to defeat his father and stop his plans of world domination. The storyline also weaves in the return of Richter Belmont, the hero from Rondo of Blood, who has gone missing. Symphony of the Night is credited with revitalizing the Castlevania franchise and inspiring a generation of indie and mainstream developers to adopt the Metroidvania genre. Its deep exploration, rich mechanics, and artistic presentation continue to influence games to this day. It has been re-released on several platforms and remains a fan favorite for both longtime Castlevania fans and newcomers. The graphics in Castlevania, Symphony of the Night for the PlayStation 1 are a significant part of what makes the game stand out, especially for its time. The game is a prime example of excellent 2D sprite art during an era when most developers were shifting to 3D graphics. The graphics in Castlevania, Symphony of the Night for the PlayStation 1 are a significant part of what makes the game stand out, especially for its time. The game is a prime example of excellent 2D sprite art during an era when most developers were shifting to 3D graphics. Symphony of the Night features beautifully animated 2D sprites, most notably for Alucard, the protagonist. His movements are smooth, fluid, and detailed, from swinging his sword to transforming into different creatures. The enemies and bosses are equally impressive, with unique and often grotesque designs that range from skeletons to gigantic monsters. The game is filled with intricacies in the way characters and enemies move and react. For instance, when Alucard runs, his cape flows behind him with a level of detail rarely seen in games of that era. Similarly, each enemy has distinct attack animations that add depth to the combat. The game's setting, Dracula's castle, is vast and varied. Every room and section of the castle has a distinct theme, from the eerie hallways of the Marble Gallery to the foreboding clock tower. Each area is rendered with rich detail, with dark, foreboding backdrops full of Gothic architecture such as grand staircases, stained glass windows, and imposing statues. When Symphony of the Night launched in 1997, it didn't perform as well as expected in terms of sales, especially in North America. Despite receiving critical acclaim, the game sold only around 60,000 copies during its first year in the US market. One factor for the slow start was the growing trend of 3D gaming at the time. Many players were gravitating toward 3D titles like Super Mario 64 and Final Fantasy VII, and Symphony of the Night, being a 2D sprite-based game, was seen as out of step with these trends. However, over time, the game gained traction through word of mouth, strong reviews, and its eventual status as a cult classic. Sales continued to grow steadily, and by the time the game was recognized as one of the all-time greats, it had sold over 700,000 copies worldwide across its original PlayStation release. This number doesn't account for re-releases on other platforms. While specific up-to-date numbers aren't always available, it is estimated that the total sales across all platforms have surpassed 1 million units. The game has enjoyed steady sales over time thanks to its reputation and availability on multiple platforms. Castlevania, Symphony of the Night is generally well regarded for its polished gameplay, but like many games, it does have a few bugs and issues that players have encountered. One of the most famous glitches in the game involves the Sword Brothers spell. Players can use this glitch to duplicate items and generate infinite quantities of powerful equipment or items. By executing the Sword Brothers spell in a specific location, players can open the game's menu during a certain part of the animation, allowing them to move items from one hand to another while the game's state is in flux. There are ways to skip certain boss fights by using glitches. For example, players can manipulate Alucard's transformation powers, such as mist or bat forms, to bypass rooms and avoid encounters entirely. Although Symphony of the Night generally runs well, there are occasional moments of slowdown on the original PlayStation hardware. Busy areas, in some rooms, particularly those with many enemies or detailed backgrounds, the game's frame rate can drop slightly. Special effects, some spells or boss fights that feature a lot of on-screen effects, such as fire or multiple projectiles, can cause minor frame drops.
Alucard, what is your business here?
I've come to put an end to this.
Still befriending mortals. I'll not ask you to return to our side, but I demand you cease your attack.
I will not.
You shall regret those words. We will meet again.
One of the game's most famous twists is the introduction of the reverse castle. Halfway through the game, once you defeat Richter Belmont under certain conditions, you unlock the entire map of the castle flipped upside down. This effectively doubles the size of the game and introduces new enemies and bosses. The reverse castle caught many players off guard, especially at a time when lengthy games weren't as common. Many believed the game was near its end, only to discover that they were just halfway through. Symphony of the Night was directed by Koji Igarashi, who took over partway through development. Igarashi pushed to shift the game from the series' traditional linear gameplay to a more exploration-heavy style, which was considered risky at the time. Igarashi was also responsible for emphasizing Alucard as the main character rather than a Belmont, which became a defining feature of the game. After completing the game with Alucard, you can unlock Richter Belmont as a playable character. Playing as Richter makes the game feel more like a classic Castlevania title, as he retains his traditional whip-based combat style. Castlevania, Symphony of the Night is not only one of the most beloved entries in the Castlevania series, but also one of the most influential games in the action-adventure genre. Its innovative blend of non-linear exploration, RPG mechanics, and atmospheric 2D graphics helped define the Metroidvania genre. While it had modest initial sales, its enduring legacy and cult following turned it into a timeless classic, praised for its depth, gameplay, music, and secrets. From its memorable twist with the reverse castle, to its iconic voice acting and soundtrack, Symphony of the Night continues to inspire players and developers alike. Its glitches, Easter eggs, and speed-run potential add to its charm, making it a game that still captivates audiences decades after its release. All of these elements cement its place as one of the greatest video games of all time.